Reflecting on a couple of points that Dave made, I should at the outset out myself as one of those people that squandered public money in 1997. Those of you that remember when the Sure Start projects first started, the government gave you a stack of cash and then rang you up the next week and wanted to know what you'd done with it. And there was a pressure, because you were worried that if you didn't spend it now, then perhaps you'd get less last year. And I gave in to that temptation, and I bought a whole raft of Sure Start paraphernalia, and I had an entire cupboard full of it in Barking and Dagenham when I worked there. We had mugs, we had pens, we had little furry gonks that you could stick on the top of your computer. A lot of the stuff was still there when I left in 2004. I suspect a lot of the stuff is still there now, so if there is anyone from Barking and Dagenham, do have a look on the ground floor at the Civic Centre. I was interested in the comment about courageous conversations, and I think that is important. The position we're in does take a degree of courage and leadership, and it is about that courage to still try to do things differently, to try things out, in the knowledge that it may not work, in the knowledge that it may fail. I've got a quote from Winston Churchill on my wall in Maidstone, which I know is rather grandiose of me, but the quote is, "Success is the ability to go from one failure to another without a commensurate loss of enthusiasm." And having said that, and I'm going to stare directly into the camera, I do care what Ofsted think. Dave is speaking with the confidence of somebody that's had their single inspection framework inspection. Kent is not. So we're one of those people that wait with bated breath on notification days. And I do remember this time last year, almost to the day, we were one of 8 local authorities that were selected for the thematic inspection in child sexual exploitation. And I remember it well because it was a Tuesday morning, and Tuesday morning is when we have our management meeting. And we sat there at 10 o'clock and we were doing the numbers because there were 8 local authorities chosen. And we sat there and we said, well, 6 have been selected. So that means there's 2 more out of 144. So statistically, the chances are slim. We tempted fate. About 10:30, the executive assistant for the corporate director stuck his head round the corner. We just had the call. What it means is that this poor chap on single inspection framework notification days has now become like the Grim Reaper. If I actually see him at any point before 12 noon, I do go into a cold sweat. So, moving on. Right, that's the fairly grandiose title for today. What I'd really like to do is a bit of a reflection on the agenda around the regional adoption. We have the paper that came out from the DFE in June 2015. And the theory is it's about speeding up, matching, markedly improving the life chances of neglected and damaged children, improving adopter recruitment and adoption support, and reducing costs. That's the high-level concept. And within that, they identified certain things. One of the issues they have is about inefficiencies. And prior to coming to Kent, I worked in South Gloucestershire, which is quite a small authority, so it was like moving from Luxembourg to France. And there is a real legitimacy in that, in terms of the scale, in terms of working at a level where you have the ability, you have the resources to deliver. There's the issue around matching, and the challenge is you can only match with what you've got until you go externally. So the greater the pool, the greater the opportunity. And in terms of recruitment, again, it's how quickly, how efficient can you be? It's that gardening calendar of when you have your information evenings, the throughput, the volume. And then there's this key issue of adoption support, and I'm going to come to that a little bit later. But it is about what is available, and it's also about the depth and the range of the services that are available. And another issue I want to come back to is about that correlation and that synergy with the other orders, the SGO. Why adoption and not the others? So, in terms of the challenges, there's also opportunities identified. So, looking at those, you get recruitment that is driven by a larger range of children. So you can be more diverse, you can be more courageous, if you like, in terms of your recruitment. You do have that access to a larger pool of adopters. The bigger the pool, the greater the range. It's about sharing and developing a wider range of support services. It's about being able to go that extra mile, if you like, in trying things out, in sharing resources, in sharing facilities. And it's about learning. It's about developing excellent practice skills and behaviour. It's about learning from others. And it's about transparency, protocols for early help. I think one of the things that's absolutely central is that whole system approach. It's about being proactive rather than reactive, and that the whole permanence planning process starts the day that the young person comes into care. And it is an opportunity to share costs and benefit from economies of scale. Very true. Now, reflecting on that, thinking about Kent by numbers, we are quite large. It is like managing Belgium at times. So just throwing a few figures out, we've got 7 clinical commissioning groups. At various points we've been running in 4 adoption panels. We've got 5 children in care service managers, some of whom I can see are staring at me now. At various points we've had 4 agency decision makers, still do. We're dealing with 5 political groups across the council. We have 1,400 looked after children, that's citizen children. I can't stand up and do a presentation without mentioning the US. The figure as of today was 963. I'm going to leave it there. 2 panel advisors, and most importantly, a partnership with the voluntary adoption agency Coram. All of these slides should really have Coram against it. It's me standing here today. So the reflection is, okay, so what does all of that mean? And the reality is, the opportunities, the challenges that are being thrown out in terms of this regional approach are in many ways what we've been working with the last 3 or 4 years. And what does that mean in terms of outcomes? Well, that table very, very simply spells it out. I mean, our adoption service was not in a good state 3 or 4 years back. And those figures speak for themselves, really. You know, adoption approvals, 67 to 138. Children matched, 78 to 145. Children placed, 68 to 143. Adoption orders, 70 to 182. Tremendous amount of work has gone into that collectively across my service and across Coram. But that's the benefit, that's the outcome. So what is this regional about? What is the scale? What is the efficiency? What does it give you? It can give you that sort of level of improvement. It does give you that sort of level of opportunity. So what have we learnt along the way? Lessons to impart. There is the issue of complexity. And I think my message to you really is don't be afraid of complexity. Complexity can be your friend. In terms of scale, big is not necessarily better, but it does create opportunity. But you have to maximise the opportunities that the scale presents. It doesn't necessarily lead that the scale will deliver improvement. There's also the issue around organisational cultures. I'm going to come to that a little bit later. But there is also, and this is a really important point, is the creativity and innovation. It's about coming at something from a different perspective. It's about being able to try something different. And you know, it creates an environment within which that is possible. In terms of complexity theory, the study of complex and chaotic systems and how order, pattern and structure can arise from them. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with chaotic systems and how to order them. I suspect we've all had experience of that. But it is grasping all of these competing demands, all of these competing services. And if you're looking at a regional level, you are going to look at that multiplication. You're going to have different authorities. You're going to have different degrees of political control. If you have a voluntary sector group, you're going to have their culture, their perspective. You have to meld all of this together. I've got a quote as well from an elderly gentleman with a lot of hair. An intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. And that is the key, really, in relation to complexity. It's about making it simple. The complexity in itself can be disempowering. It's how you distill that down into key goals, key principles, and the direction of travel, which everybody can align with. In terms of scale, I think one of the issues, one of the concerns is about this level of selfishness when you're working at a one authority level. Yes, first and foremost, adoption is a service for children, and your primary concern is in relation to the children in your care. But when you look at it at a helicopter view, it can be constraining. Interesting piece of research. Do we nationally miss out on opportunities because we have too narrow a focus, because we're in our silos in relation to our local authorities? And again, will a regional approach open up those constraints? In terms of organisation cultures, again, first and foremost, it's about a common goal. You need to know where you're heading, why you're heading there, what you want to do. Do be clear about your information system. We've had a few to-ins and throw-ins over that. Data is absolutely key. Anything and everything that you do, data, data, data. So if you're melding a number of organisations together, do make sure you've got an agreed ground in relation to how the data gets provided. And it is that whole system focus. And obviously adoption doesn't work in isolation from the rest of the service. It's that synergy, it's that link, it's that chain of good practice, and everyone within a local authority, Children's Service Department, will contribute to the adoption outcome. It's the assessment workers that do the good assessment, identify the risk. It's the long-term workers that take the case through proceedings, come to the right conclusions. It's the foster carers, the fostering support workers that make sure those children are supported and prepared. So it's that seamless chain, but with an end destination and a common goal. And it is about creating a new culture. When you bring a number of different organisations together, it's important that you don't have cultures which are competing with each other. In some ways, echoing, I think, what Andrew Christie said about bringing the three boroughs together, it's about creating a new culture. So rather than just choosing one and going with that, it's bringing the best from each of them and creating a new culture. And as I say, first and foremost, it's about creativity and innovation. One of the things that we did with Coram was an adoption activity day, and it was a little bit contentious. There were some people that felt slightly uncomfortable about putting children through this, and so what we did was we brought a group of children that required adoptive parents. We got a group of approved adoptive carers who are awaiting a match. We dressed them all up as pirates, and we put them together to see how they get on. The end result of all of that is that a quarter of those children who were there on that day sailed off into the sunset with permanent families. And whichever way you come at that from, that surely is an outcome which is worth the effort. In terms of family finding, I think that was one of the real weaknesses that we had before Coram joined us. We'd lost the skill of being able to present and profile children. And it is a delicate issue. You have to get it right. You don't want to undersell the potential care needs that a child has and set them up to fail. But again, you don't want to profile them in such a way that they're not going to get placed. It's a really key skill, and it's one that we've developed with our colleagues in Coram, which we didn't have before. And it is that issue of post-order support. It's moving away from the standard one-size-fits-all, this is what post-adoption is. It's about that breadth of idea and challenge and freshness that you get from the voluntary sector, and I'm sure Annie will talk about this in more detail. It's about, well, why do you do it that way? And I know it's that end-old issue of how do you get the CAM service on board in relation to the therapeutic support, because the therapeutic support is key, those attachment disorders. And rather than being reliant upon getting something from CAMs, why don't you build that into the service? And that's one of the key gains I think we've had from the work with Coram, is that more diverse, multidisciplinary approach to post-adoption support. And it is that challenge of established routines against the freshness of the new ideas. In relation to permanence, I'm finishing with a quote from our Minister, Edward Timpson, who was here earlier on this week, I understand. But also a reflection, because just on the train coming up here, there's an interesting article on the community care website, which has gone on today, from an adopter who's also an author. And it's quoting some figures in relation to the current imbalance for adopters and children requiring placement. The March figures which he quotes, on the National Register in March, there were 2,810 children requiring adoption, and there were 3,350 adopters. And I suppose the message in relation to that is adoption within the scheme, within the spectrum of permanence. You know, adoption is not for every child. It is right that we have aspiration and ambition in relation to which children can be placed for adoption. One of the key issues for us in Kent was a lack of aspiration. I particularly recall the issue of a disabled child who was the youngest sibling in a group where the other children had had placement orders, had been placed for adoption. This 2-year-old child, we'd not sought the placement order because he was quite profoundly disabled. We'd not even tried. Case came to the disability team from the mainstream team. We took it straight back to court. You know, how do we know we can't get a child placed for adoption if you don't try at that age? It's a long time to be in care. That child is now adopted. Now that's not to say you can achieve that. You know, you have to measure that aspiration with the reality of what's best for the child. And it is measuring that aspiration, if you like, in relation to ultimately we have to do what is best for the child. It's not just about chasing performance targets in relation to children placed for adoption. It's making sure that adoption takes its place in the scheme with SGO, child arrangements orders, and long-term fostering. We shouldn't invalidate the validity of long-term fostering. And in terms of the permanence, they only become permanent if the support is there when the family experience some challenge and difficulty. Because otherwise you don't achieve permanence, you achieve short-term care, and then you find yourself with a level of disruption. And I suppose part of the issue, part of the challenge around the adoption agenda is how the resourcing, the focusing, the improvements that we're seeing in relation to post-adoption support can be amplified and can be rolled across in relation to the SGO. We've identified in Kent it's a weakness. We're going to do something about it. But it's making sure that whatever preferred vehicle is right for the child in terms of achieving permanence, it is a level playing field and that the supports are available to ensure the child gets to the end journey in relation to adulthood without disruption.